Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So, today's guest has got a really interesting background as an adolescent. He was sleeping on park benches, eating out of trash bins. That was sort of his norm. And then he learned the importance of hard work and determination while growing up in the Philippines. Now he's living in Mexico. He's mastered the art of customer service and sales for more than a decade. Now, for years before the company he's working at now, he worked under sweatshop like conditions in call centers, and over time became real passionate about educating brands on how to scale high performing teams in both ethical and efficient manners. Now, our guest firmly believes that sales, they're not just simple sales, rather, it's about consulting and recommending what best suits the needs of a brand. He's a vice president of growth over at Support Zebra. Welcome to the show, Daniel Viduya.
Thank you for having me today, Charles. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really am curious to dive a little bit deeper into your background. Can you tell me a little bit more about what growing up as a kid was like for you?
Well, actually, that was not my life to begin with, somewhat. It became that at some point because of my falling out with family. It is a sad experience, but it's also something that I know that I was able to get it myself out of, and many people are also trying to do that. But because of my gender and my identity, to put it in a more PC manner, I found myself to be homeless. And not only that, from being homeless, I was also a victim of violence. In fact, I sought help from the local police and they only laughed at me because I was a boy, but they just laughed, didn't get help. But there are still some good people out there. And the people that did help me get back on track and get back on my feet, that's how I started to be able to work in a more proper career and field that is from front office to serving tables to starting in the call center finally when I turned 18. I had to lie about my age because legal working age in the Philippines is actually 18. So I had to lie about my age just so that I'd be able to work in the restaurant and hotel industry. So yeah, that was my life. At 18, I started my career as a customer service agent. That's where everything began because I was placed in such a challenging line of business that I learned how to do customer service and sales immediately.
Now, I've often found in talking with so many different successful entrepreneurs that it was really through their greatest challenges that sort of gave birth to a new set of rewards. But are you at the point where you can look back and say, if that didn't happen to me, I wouldn't have made certain decisions which brought me here. And for that reason, I can look back and see the benefits that have come from that? Where does that sit with you?
That specific incident, the part of being homeless and sleeping in park benches, I could say that it did make me stronger and it did make me value what I have today. I'm grateful for for what I'm able to put on the table. Every piece of grain of rice and blessing, people would notice and they keep on asking me, why do you keep posting your pictures on Instagram with things that you cook? It's because back then I really couldn't have those things, let alone the family that I grew up with, we really couldn't have good food every single day. We only had what we could, which was a single piece of burger patty that we could fry for dinner. Each of us would have one piece with rice. We'd be grateful to have one and a half piece, or we would have a hot dog, a piece again. Or sometimes for breakfast, we would have noodles. So we're three brothers. We would cook 2 packs of noodles and divide that into three people and some rice to buffer that up. That's what we could afford before. But looking back to where I grew up and where I was at some point of being homeless, I post the food that I cook every day because I guess that's why. It's because I'm grateful that I do have these and I get the option to choose what I want to eat. I look back and I'm grateful. The part of me being a victim of violence, it's still a challenge that I'm trying to overcome. Not many people know that I am a victim of violence, but I think that a bigger part of me inside is that being a victim of violence, I encourage other people that if they're also a victim, that they need to speak up. And it doesn't matter what gender they are. If they identify themselves to be a man, woman, if they are identify themselves to be of whatever who they are, if they're a victim of violence, they have to speak up because everyone deserves to be treated right and everyone deserves justice. But right now, I think enough about me. I know my background is quite rich, but then I'd love to serve our audience and have them learn today. That's what I'm really excited about.
Awesome. Well, the one thing that I want to say is I encourage you to share that story as much as possible. As we enter this discerning market environment, we're seeing the importance of building not only a business brand, but also that of a personal brand. People like to do business with other people they know, like, and trust. Though one of the challenges with building a personal brand is oftentimes people want to put on this facade that they're this superhero, that everything in their life is perfect and they're smart, and so they share all this advice and so forth. But superheroes also have their kryptonite. And by being willing and vulnerable to share the story of your kryptonite, it will allow you to build an affinity with a market and allow you to connect with people at a real soulful level. But all those stories are what make you interesting. And so, Daniel, I know that you've definitely had trauma in your life, but that trauma, in many ways, I just want you to look at it as there are opportunities that can come from that, building out who you are in your own personal brand as well. And there's a whole market out there that can look at how far you've come in your life and see that as a source of inspiration for themselves. So you can not only serve to connect with people, but serve to inspire others who might just one day dream to accomplish the same things that you've accomplished right now. So as Vice President of Growth, your role is really just talk to me a little bit about like your core focus.
How can I put it in a better way? So I could say that we create great experiences on every single transaction for e-commerce and SaaS brands. There you go. That's what I want
Got
to
it.
say.
And you
We
work with
want to
some
make,
pretty notable brands, like Athletic Greens would be one of them.
yes, and Linktree in the SaaS side. Yep.
Yeah, those are some big, wonderful brands and so forth. So when we look at Support Zebra, it's an outsourced company. How do you choose a brand partner that for outsourcing? How would you even go about doing that if you were somebody listening who is saying, okay, look, I'm interested in outsourcing my support. Why should I outsource the support, and how would I choose a partner?
We don't really use the term outsourcing with us
Okay.
because outsourcing is really commonly used out there. It also denotes an impression that, okay, we're outsourcing this to a third party. We're outsourcing this to a different entity. And that just gives the impression that we are not a part of them. And that's an important criteria that we
Mm,
consider when we select our service partner. That is, we don't see ourselves to be an external provider. Technically and by paper, yes, for sure. But when it comes to treating your customers, when it comes to giving your customer a great experience every single transaction, you cannot limit yourself to thinking that you're just that third party. You have to consider yourself to be a part of your service partner, to be a part of your client, because you want them to feel that you embrace their processes, you embrace their culture, you embrace their values, their policies, and most of all, you embrace their customers.
mm.
So that's the biggest factor that we consider is how do we see themselves to be a part of that? How open are they to building that culture of care and greatness?
That's a really good point. I feel like there's been many times throughout my life where I've called a customer support line and I just know when they're outsourced. There's just this feeling that they're outsourced versus when you're connecting with somebody where you actually feel like you're talking a member of the team. How does that actually happen? How do you blend that line from, being like technically an outsourced company, but then really a part of the team? How does that happen? How do you become a part of the team?
It's how you treat your people. It's how you represent your brand. And I could tell you a short story of how that's like. American Express, a very popular brand. And I know for a fact that American Express outsources to India and the Philippines. Very obvious because I lived in the Philippines, so I know they have an office in the Philippines and also in India. When I called American Express customer service, I noted the accent. But I really didn't think about that being a problem. And that's because the impression that I have of them is that they are still a part of American Express and that they embrace the value that American Express gives to their customers. That is, when I called one time and I had a problem with my card because it was misdelivered to another address or somewhat to another suite number,
Hmm.
and the building management couldn't find my package. And I said, "Where's my card?" I said, it's pretty concerned because that's credit card that's somewhere else there and it's missing." But anyhow, American Express, and whom I was speaking to was someone from India, said, "Look, I really appreciate you being a valued American Express member. I can for sure tell you that I'm going to help you find that package. I'll do what I can to see where it is. And if we can't do anything about it, then that's going to get you a replacement." And so he did everything in his power before even filing the replacement to try to track down my package. And eventually they found it. And it was shipped to me, and I finally received my card. The way that the call transaction went is that I never felt like I was speaking to someone who was outsourced or offshore. I felt like I was speaking to someone who's in the United States who equally and genuinely cared for me as a
Sure.
valued member of American Express. And that's how American Express runs their customer service. They internalize the people that they have and make them feel their customers that VIP treatment, just as if someone onshore would treat them.
Sure.
Being an outsourcing company or being offshore, it doesn't mean that you have to, be conscious about where you are. If you could be honest about where you are, then great. People don't care if you're really offshore. They only start looking at that issue if you cannot help them, or if you treat them wrong, or if you don't stand right by them. That's when the problem somewhat magnifies that they just look at other things than the real problem itself.
And you actually said one word that really summarized everything. You said the word empowered. And that American Express customer service rep was empowered. He was empowered to solve the problem versus other times when you may call and they go, "Hold on, let me put you on hold." And they'll run over their manager. "How am I supposed to do this?" Or they're looking up a script. What am I supposed to do? And they're just not well trained. And, you're always on hold. And then they repeat something to you that you told them that you've already tried 10 times over. And, but they have to go through a script rather than that empowerment of listening and the, being trained enough to know how to handle something so that it's a seamless conversation.
And it's consistent. That's another thing. Wherever I am, maybe in Mexico City or in the United States or over the phone, they always say, "Hey, valued member, welcome. Thank you for being with us. And we thank you for
Yes.
also choosing American Express." They always make you feel that consistency. So that's why I think that it doesn't matter if they're outsourced or not, because there's that consistency. Consistency is the key for many brands that are listening to this podcast right now. You want to feel like your people, customers are not going to think that outsourcing is an issue. If they spot inconsistencies on the service that they receive, onshore versus offshore, that's where there is also a problem. But it's also the reverse way around. What if there is an inconsistency on onshore versus offshore? That's a rare situation, but that can also happen. And that can become a problem for your brand too. I would cite this classic example right now, Delta Airlines. This is very recent, Charles. I posted on Instagram how Delta ruined my luggage. The handle was completely missing. It's the top part is obliterated. And I went to baggage services and they said, "Sir, your baggage is made out of plastic." I said, "Not entirely true. It's fiber plastic." I said, and they told me, "Sir, if we take a baseball bat to this, it would be broken." I said, "I told you this luggage was fragile." And so the difference here was that when I called their baggage services claim to follow up on what happened, the woman on the phone was like, "Oh, you just need to send us a receipt when you buy new luggage." And I'm like, "Is there a guarantee that I could get the refund?" I was like, That's the treatment I literally received. And I felt bad. So, I sent a personal message to their chief operating officer, customer officer. I said, "Look, this is not the way you're supposed to be treating your passengers, let alone that, I wasn't rude. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't, you see, consistency." So I'm calling these names out and I'm citing real examples because I don't want to put shame, or, I want to make this a learning experience for everyone, that if consistency is not observed, you will lose your customers.
Well, there's this saying that we use that variation is the enemy of excellence. And so, by reducing that variation, it allows you to provide, just as you said, a far more consistent experience. But the other point that you brought up that's also important to know is on the side of customer service. A mentor of mine many years ago said if you could only grow your business through word of mouth and referrals, how would you run your business differently than you're doing right now? So if you could only grow your business through word of mouth and referrals, what would you do differently? It really got me thinking. And when we look at Delta or any of the other companies that you've dealt with in the past, if they put that at the forefront of their customer service or customer experience strategy, if we could only grow our business through word of mouth and referrals, what would it have to look differently? If somebody calls in and has a problem or has a question, instead of looking at it as the nucleus behind your referrals, which is, or even for that matter, your repeat business, or how it impacts
Mm,
lifetime customer value and brand
yeah,
loyalty and
exactly.
all that other part. So it is a really, really important part of business that all too frequently is overlooked.
You raised a very valid point there, Charles. And moreover, many of those questions are answered in the book called The Ultimate Question 2.0 by Fred Reichelt, one of my favorite books, by the way, that was mentioned to me by David Hensel,
Oh, yeah.
my previous boss. He told me to get into the books and taught me that book, and that book really opened many insights. That is, your customers will really take that action, will affect your brand reputation, but also affect their lifetime value and growth. Going back with American Express, I've already referred 4 people over to them because that's how much I trust American Express. That's how much I like them. Versus with Delta, which just recently they sent me an email about tell us about your recent flight experience. I'm never flying with them again, nor will I ever refer people over to them. A difference would be ANA, All Nippon Airways. I fly with them frequently. And many of my friends who are Filipinos living here in Mexico are flying with them because I told them, try ANA. They're affordable, but they are great in service consistently. They're on time. That's just me being a tiny ant referring other
Mm-hmm.
tiny ants to you. But what about the big ones? It's the same thing. When you deal with an enterprise account and you give them a negative experience, expect that it's not just going to be a negative effect with your relationship with them. It could be a domino effect with those other enterprises that they know that they are also working with that could tell their experience.
And here's what's interesting, right? You, at a micro level, all of us have done this before where we go to a restaurant and the food might be really good, but your server is terrible. And so you have a bad experience and you walk out, you go, I don't know that I'll ever go back to the restaurant because the service is terrible. But really, what it is that server was terrible. Now, with what you said with Delta, we've had two different experiences. For me, Delta has been the best airline that I fly around, and I have a great experience with Delta. But your experience has been tainted by a bad customer service experience. And, whereas I haven't had the same experience, but Delta has thousands and thousands and thousands of employees. But there's another good point. There's too much variation between the employees. Chances are, if you were ever to fly Delta again, you can meet with somebody else and have an extraordinary experience, which may or may not change your opinion. And most people that I've spoken with have never actually gone through that experience. Now, I imagine that if the Delta CEO ghost shopped, but his or her experience and had a similar one to the one that you had, that CEO would be completely distraught and upset and potentially change the service experience. But leaders have oftentimes, as the organization grows bigger and bigger and bigger, they distance themselves from the customer side, from the executive side. And
Exactly.
the longer that line of sight spreads, the more challenges you tend to find in a business. But then you start going beyond that, you lose that line of sight, and it
The
becomes
variance
more and more
increases.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
more and more important than the right systems, the right training, the right measurements in place, and so forth. So several good points.
It is, and I know that but here's the thing. And it's not just applicable to Delta, it's applicable to everyone, to every
Yeah.
brand. That bad experience given by one person, by that one rep or by the few reps, these are just few people versus the thousands of employees they have. But why is it that my impression of Delta is affected? That is because in any customer like me, and a consumer like me, you don't think of them as an individual. You think of them as the brand. And so if they give that impression that affects your experience in the most negative manner, you also think about the brand itself.
Yeah.
And going to your point, if we try to put this individually, there are great people there with Delta. There was a video of this gate agent at Delta who was really good vibes, playing a Janet Jackson song, I think. She was, getting people to come forward and get bored with their gate. Now, I wanted that experience. I was so excited to get that experience, not being able to dance a Janet Jackson song, but just be able to get a great experience flying with Delta, because I paid for a higher tier ticket.
Yeah, for sure.
Inconsistencies will create problems. There is a difference to being good and being great. Do you know what that is, Charles?
I'd be interested to hear what you have to say.
Being good is just being good at some times. You're good. Yeah, he's good. But being great is being consistently good every single time. Quote the word consistently. If you're consistently good, if you're consistently treating your customers right, like American Express is, even if they can't give you some things you're requesting for, but if they just treat you consistently well, you will grow. Your brand will grow. That's the difference. And I think, yeah.
That's a great thing. The difference between good and great. Good is doing things good sometimes. Great is doing things good consistently. I like that.
That's what my supervisor told me when I was a call center agent back in 2013. She said, Daniel, your attendance is a problem. You're good. You're good with many things, but you're not consistently good when it comes to your attendance, when it comes to your punctuality, when it comes to your presence in the office, and that's stunting your growth to become a leader. I was an agent back in the day. That supervisor of mine was the reason why I was inspired to climb up the ladder and work my way. That's when I stopped having attendance issues. And I was sick. I was a sick person, but she made a very valid point. Look, people get sick. They get headaches, stomach aches, acid reflux, and all that. But it's your responsibility to take care of your body. You know how to treat your body like a temple. You make the choice and what you put inside your body. You make the choice.
Sure.
So she said, if you start taking care of yourself and you start being consistently good to yourself as well, start great to yourself, then great things will happen to you. And 10 years down the line, a decade has passed ever since she had a conversation with me, and here we are today.
Excellent. So, Daniel, we're pushing up against the clock here, and this is the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. So what would you say your biggest, best tip would be for the CEOs and the founders listening who want to take their business beyond seven figures?
My biggest tip for them to take their business to beyond seven figures is to take care of their customers. Invest in that lifetime value. There is no price to be paid for being kind and consistently good. There isn't. It's free of charge. You just have to find the right people to do that for you, because you cannot do this on your own. You need people to stand by you and advocate for that great service. When you do that, your business will naturally grow.
And do it consistently.
Consistently. That's the keyword for the day.
Got it. People want to learn more about you and support Zebra. Where do we send them?
You could send them to supportzebra.com. I see them in the forums. The phone number displayed on the upper right part of the screen of their website, the website, is actually a direct number to me. I can also be found on LinkedIn, Daniel Viduya. If you have any questions at all, let me know. I thereby solemnly swear that I will not try to sell you anything unless you give me the permission to do so. If you want to come to me for a consultation, just to learn, just to ask any questions, just for thought leadership purposes, I'm here. I'm not going to be the pushy type of person until you give me the express permission to do so.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you very much. I appreciate you being a guest here with the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. And for all of our guests and listeners, for more tips, strategies, and information for taking your company beyond seven figures, also check us out at predictableprofits.com. Again, that's predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Gaudette with my friend Daniel Viduya, and I will see you in another episode.